deal in his first term, he actually mentioned that this was a disastrous deal from day one in the history because we know that these mullahs don't keep their promises.
That's our broadcast. Folks, where else will you hear this other than here? Worldviewfoundation.com. Live up to freedom.
You are watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
At the end of the 100 days of the Trump administration, let's just review for a moment the opposition to it. And it's actually, if you think about it, a tripartite, a threefold opposition. Pollsters, the media, and the Democratic Party and the institutionalized left. The pollsters have Donald Trump down four or 5 points, but when you actually look at the Rasmussen poll or Mark Penn's poll, a Democratic centrist, Trump is almost even. And then when you look with greater clarity at the New York Times poll that has him way down, you see that only 37% of the people polled voted for Donald Trump. But Donald Trump won by almost 1.5 points. Don't you think it should have been, 51, 49%? So they were deliberately, in the case of the New York Times, under polling Trump supporters. The same was true with the Washington Post. They polled over 2,000 people, but only 840 were identified as Trump voters. Shouldn't that have been half? So what am I getting at? We're getting right back to what happened in 2016 when the polls were completely wrong. The same thing happened in 2020 when they overestimated Biden's strength by 4 or 5 points. And then even in 2024, the NPR poll had, on the last day of the election, they had Kamala Harris winning by 4 points. The Des Moines Register had Iowa lost to Trump by 3 points. He won it by 12. So what the pollsters are doing, not that Trump hasn't lost some because of the controversy over the trade wars, but the pollsters are trying to create momentum, fundraising, and jazz up opposition.
Let me tell you a secret, folks. The corporate polls are lying. Welcome back to Whistleblower Wednesday. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube, our X Spaces simulcast, Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social Plus, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Roku. Well, the recent usual suspect polling on President Trump's approval ratings as of this month shows a false mixed picture, with a general trend of declining support, as you just heard, since the start of the second term. According to a manipulated New York Times report, that's my word, from May 13th, Trump's approval rating has dropped to around 44%, down from 52% shortly after his January 20th inauguration. And man, are we going to miss these guys when they finally meet their demise. This is purposely intended to show a sharper decline than that of most recent presidents at a similar point in their terms. Polls from outlets like CNN, Pew Research, the Washington Post, ABC, Ipsos, those are all terms. When you hear them, think false narrative or influence operation or propaganda or Democrat support. And they were all conducted in late April. These polls indicate approval ratings ranging from 39 to 45%, with disapproval exceeding 55% most of the time. They try to show key issues dragging down his numbers, including what? Let's see, economic concerns, particularly fears of a recession. Oh, my God. rising prices due to his tariffs. 71% of the voters, so-called voters in an ABC News poll, cited tariffs as a negative factor in inflation. Well, immigration is a strength for Trump, right? No. Now it's seen waning confidence, with only 45% approving of his handling of the issue. And that's from a CNN poll. That's down from 60% in December 2024. Think about those numbers. That's not very long ago. Of course, the nearly 100% negative media coverage of Trump's approach to these issues helped these pollsters present these false narratives. The reality is, reliable pollsters like Rasmussen Reports, who Victor Davis Hanson just talked about, show that the president's net approval ratings at a range of +1 to +3, and recent economic numbers will likely show that those numbers increase rapidly. That's my prediction, not my guest today. My guest today is Mark Mitchell, and he's the Rasmussen Reports head pollster, and we're going to talk about the usual suspects that create these numbers and what their intent really is and what's really happening in the world. His data is so reliable, he changed his X handle to @HonestPollster. You should go follow him. And he's not bragging. It's a reality. Mark is not only their head pollster, he's also a fellow veteran and a U.S. Navy Academy graduate. Mark, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show.
Yeah, great to be here. And let's bifurcate those two things. There's accuracy, which I think we do pretty well, and I try to do a good job. And then there's honesty. And listen, I'm really one of the only voices out there calling out what I see, because there's a ton of people that cover liberal media bias, but turns out that the same corporations are probably going to put out polls that are suspect as well. And they have time and time again, and kind of becoming a little bit of a lightning rod about it. But we'll see. I don't know. Starting to get some attacks.
Well, it should be a lightning rod, and I saw just before I came on, there's some kind of kerfuffle going on between you and Mark Halperin, but I didn't have time to dive into it. What's up there? Is he disputing what you say? Because when I look at what you say, Mark, I see a straight shooter. When I peel back the layers of what you're talking about and your numbers, I can't find anything nefarious like what Victor Davis Hanson talked about the polling universe that the New York Times poll used, for instance.
Well, I try to explain what I'm seeing, and I'm not trying to make predictions. I'm trying to give people data, and I make my data accessible and talk through it. And if you look at, Mark Halperin's friends with J.N. Seltzer that had that horrible miss that Victor Davis Hanson talked about. And if you look at her interview about that miss, she wasn't very specific about why she thought it happens. And that's different than what I would do. I would be really frustrated and have exact answers of what went wrong with my sample and how I wasn't going to do it again. And so what ultimately, in my opinion, it comes down to is an openness and a willingness to defend your work. Listen, we're humans. We make mistakes. Communication's hard. Sometimes we say words that, we don't mean. But I look at Mark Halperin's segment that he did on us, I think it was last week, and he used logical fallacies and called us things like a Republican pollster. I'm not a Republican pollster. I'm going to rip on Republicans tonight on my poll because the polling for them is pretty bad. And it's like, okay, you're going to lead your segment with, here's a Republican pollster telling you that the fake news polls are lying and, oh, they're not fake. And then he goes on to say, well, they do have a habitually left-wing bias. Well, is that fake or not? Because that's what I thought fake news meant, was that they had a habitually left-wing bias. So it's like, if I listen to a segment where my name's talked about for 45 seconds and there's like 5 logical fallacies in it, I don't know if I can have an honest discussion with a person like that about it or not. I would love to try, but it's all about that point that you talked about. And here's the truth. Donald Trump's approval rating was dropping for most of January, February, and March. Well, guess what? That's what every president does. They have a honeymoon. It wears out. And also, Trump's approval is not very high considering recent historical trends. And also, there's an explanation for that, and that's that we're on the cusp of a civil war, and everybody thinks there's going to be political violence. But what is wild is when my numbers, I can tell, are about 3 or 4 points to the right of all the mainstream media corporate pollsters. And then all of a sudden I'm 12 points to the right, and everybody dumps a poll at the same time right into the news cycle in advance of Trump's 100 days. Then I say, well, they're probably coordinating. And that's what my accusation was. Were all of them coordinating to tank Trump's approval? No, I don't think so, but probably ABC, because Stephanopoulos was talking about it. ABC's got friends in the Kamala Harris camp. They're tied into Disney. I don't think Disney likes Trump. So there's a whole, again, you never know, right? But when 12 scummy pollsters dump horrible Trump polling, you can see it in the aggregate. You can literally look at the Real Clear Politics aggregate and pick exactly what day Donald Trump's 100-day mark was, because that's where all the fake polling is. And his numbers are coming back up from them. So it's just wild, just wild.
Yeah, you posted a great set of charts showing the plots, and folks, you should go look at this on Mark's timeline at Honest Pollster, because what you just said about you were showing him decreasing in his approval just like everybody else was, but then the disparity shows up because it's a plot comparing to all these so-called reputable pollsters, and then you guys. And you guys end up in the reality, and they're out somewhere. I don't know where they're at. Do you know any of these people personally that do this polling for these companies?
No, I came from outside the industry. This was actually my first presidential cycle, believe it or not. And so I really wonder what the fall would have been like if I hadn't been around. But no, they kind of hide in their ivory towers and maintain inaccessibility. And they pretend to be unbiased. And they hide behind transparency, which they say is, well, here's our full crosstabs and a really good methodology statement. But then it's really tough to get to the answers to why, for instance, the ABC Washington Post poll that had Trump underwater 12 points on approval also has him underwater 6 points on immigration. I would love to have a discussion like that. Can't get to anybody. I just retweeted that chart on my Twitter feed that you're talking about if people want to see it. But I bifurcated a group of pollsters into what I call the mainstream media pollster cartel, and then also a selected group of good pollsters. And the good pollsters match what I show, which is, Trump's a little up and a little down, but it's about net plus zero, like Victor Davis Hanson was saying. And all of these pollster cartels had Trump underwater roughly about 4 points until 2 weeks ago, and then it was underwater 11. All out of nowhere on no news. It wasn't the economic stuff. That was like 2 or 3 weeks before that. So it was literally the 100-day mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that you talked about coordination a minute ago? Look, I'm not an idiot. I see it too. How would they coordinate all of that? I mean, you're talking about 12 or so different media outlets and corporations, different. Are they all using the same pollsters or a set of pollsters, or are they all using different pollsters? How does that work?
Generally, they'll either have an in-house pollster like Nate Cohn at New York Times, and then they'll outsource a lot of the actual survey collection to like Siena College or a corporation, or they'll partner with a big panel like ABC Washington Post partners with Ipsos, which is a 50,000 person panel of U.S. folks. It's, in my opinion, not really reflective of reality. And it's okay, polling's hard. That's fine. But if you missed in 2016 and 2020, you shouldn't miss again in 2024. You should have corrected for it. And they don't. And I don't know if there's coordination, but I would say I always like to come back to public opinion. And Americans got awfully suspicious about the federal government in the era of Joe Biden, let's just say, on the judicial system, on overreach and censorship, on everything. And one of the questions we asked is, how likely is it that U.S. intelligence agencies are providing political talking points in mainstream media news organizations? 64% of the country says it's likely. Well, that's a really big number. And quite frankly, it's also pretty similar to the number of people who had no confidence in Joe Biden's mental fitness. So they saw right through that one. And so I think the people are relatively smart. And I would ask, maybe we got to get Tony Schaefer on or somebody. But I made a joke about it 2 weeks ago. How come USAID hasn't cut funding to whoever is coordinating all of these mainstream media hits on Donald Trump? Because I think it's still happening, right? So,
as it happens, I have a note here to ask you about a USAID thing, but it's not related to that. But folks, we got to go to a break here in a second. I've got a question in the audience we'll take when we come back from the break, Mark. But two veterans here are in agreement, because I agree with what Mark just said, is how likely is it that the U.S. intelligence agencies are providing talking points to the mass media, et cetera, et cetera? I think I'm in the 64%. And I bet I would be interested to know, of that 64%, how many of us are veterans? Because we have really lost confidence in the government of the United States of America here in the last 6 years. We'll be right back with Mark Mitchell, head pollster for Rasmussen Reports, here on the Rob Maness Show.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, well, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com.
There's a new Washington Post ABC Ipsos poll that's out today. Their headline, Trump's immigration ratings turn negative. He's always been able to count on people being with him on the nasty things he says about immigrants. Not anymore. People are not with him on immigration anymore. The thing he can always count on having a positive approval rating on, not anymore. So it's all bad for Trump in terms of the public just soundly rejecting everything he's doing, even the stuff that he says just for political effect. It's having the opposite political effect that he intends. I don't know that we have ever seen another first 100 days from any president this roundly rejected and hated by the American people.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and I had to put the pollster show on Whistleblower Wednesday because I feel like we're always whistleblowing. My guest is Mark Mitchell, the head pollster for Rasmussen Reports, and former Navy veteran, or a Navy veteran, and fellow veteran, servant of the United States of America. Well, Mark, before I get to my question for you about that little clip there, let's take a question from the audience. Shell is our host, and I think it's her that's got a question over there. Go ahead, Shell.
Hello, Mark. First of all, I love how you call them cartel pollsters. That's fantastic. And my question to you is, why have I never been polled? And most of us that are listening to the show have never been polled. Nobody's ever called. So why is that, sir?
Yeah. Here's a tough one for people to swallow. You're never going to get polled anymore. It's becoming harder and harder to reach people and more expensive. And quite frankly, with how small Rasmussen Reports is, it's a miracle we're still able to poll at all. They've tried to shut us down so much, and there's no money in honest polling either. But essentially, we have about 400,000 people who still have landline phones that love to answer our surveys. There's still 85 million landline phones in the U.S. Now, if you're on the do not call list or you don't have a landline, you're probably not going to get into that cycle. And then the other roughly 55% of our polling, because landline is mostly older people, is online panel aggregators. And you're welcome to go join an online panel like Metro Opinions or SurveyMo. We pay people to take our surveys. And you might eventually get a Rasmussen poll, but you're going to have to answer a whole lot of questions about what brand of cheese you prefer and stuff like that. And so there are people that are doing SMS-based, like cell phone-based dialing, and we will eventually, we haven't had to yet, it's kind of super expensive. That's the kind of stuff that New York Times can afford and then fail. And so someday maybe, but so many people don't pick up cell phones or respond to texts anymore either, that it's just really impossible to get a wide spread of America. But what I can guarantee you is that we're reaching roughly about 1 million people when we just talked about in the last segment how the YouGov panel, the Reuters Ipsos panel, all of these panels that most of the mainstream operators use are really, really limited. Like they're reaching 10 times less people than us. So ultimately what it comes down to is I can get data. I can try to predict an election outcome. I can see how close I am and then adjust for it. And that's the way it's going to go moving forward. There will always be polling as long as there are elections. It's just a question of where the data comes from.
Yeah, exactly right. Question for you, based on what you just said, though, you just reminded me that weren't you guys yanked off of 538, the poll aggregator, for being being biased Republican? And I laugh like you do, Mark, when I say that, because I've been watching you since you came on the scene, because I was a Rasmussen watcher before that, and I argue with you all the time when I see some of your results, and I go, "There's no way," all the time.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're not biased for sure, because I see results and I go, I don't really believe that, but it's them. So let me look around, and invariably, you turned out to have been tracking on the right set of data and tracking on the right trend. So how do they? The question about that clip there with Maddow and the immigration thing. I mean, that's to me as a Trump supporter, it's almost unbelievable, and it makes me chuckle when I see that type of result happen. How do they do that? Because they're not lying, right? They're actually talking about real poll results.
Well, there's different forms of lying, as you've been well trained as a former military officer. And I know as well, and it ultimately comes back to integrity. And if you don't have integrity, you'll find a way to convey the message that you want. And if you if you do have integrity, you're super conscientious that you're actually telling people the truth. And so even let's just say for a moment that the ABC Washington Post poll was completely on the up and up, which I don't think it is. If you go back and look at all of their polling, what you see, don't even look at the issue of immigration. Oh, by the way, today our immigration system is broken and everyone knows it. Families who enter our country the right way and play by the rules watch others flout the rules. 69% of the country agrees with that statement. And so that's where we're at on immigration. There's no way Donald Trump's upside down. But what you'll find in all of this ABC Washington Post Ipsos polling is that they always give Donald Trump about a 20 to 25 point favorability sandbag compared to the Democrats. Democrat will be like net +2. Donald Trump will be like net -25 or something like that. And again, what we're talking about is a scenario where Donald Trump's job approval rating is about net 0 right now. It's like +5 today in our numbers, but it's gonna stick around net 0 because you got half the country to vote for him. But even if the ABC poll was on the up and up, you have this entire layer of information gatekeeping where, yeah, obviously Rachel Maddow's production team is going to pick a poll that's bad for Donald Trump, and they're going to lead with it no matter how off that polling might be. My polls say that 64% of America supports mass deportation, and they're not going to have me on. And so there's always this layer of cherry picking that comes back to there's a war going on right now, an information war between the establishment and the anti-establishment. And I'll tell you what, this week, that executive order about the pharma pricing, I think, is going to smoke out a lot of the deception, because I think that's one of the main things that this might be about is advertiser dollars.
Yeah, that generates another question. And that's about Senator Tom Tillis. Now, I've been in not in office, but I've been in office, but I've also run for several races, including the U.S. Senate. To make yourself an outlier like that, you have to be really sure that you're going to be okay if you're a politician sitting in an elected office that's as lucrative, so to speak, as a U.S. Senate seat. And I think he's the first one to get smoked out. What say you?
Well, there's a political realignment going on where the Republican Party is the party of Donald Trump and not establishment Republicans. And I think a lot of them haven't woken up to that. They've probably seen movements come and go. But hear it from me, Rasmussen Reports, not a Republican pollster. You guys better wake up, because the paradigm is very different right now. And there are a ton of examples, but Tom Tillis is obviously the recent one. And people have probably called him a rhino for a really long time. And my understanding is he hasn't been winning by massive margins in North Carolina. But he came out and he said, you know what? I'm going to not support Ed Martin's nomination, basically blowing up Ed Martin going to deputy DOJ, right?
Right.
And Twitter didn't take that at face value. They said, well, hold up, like, let's take a look at this. And he got ratioed and brutalized in the comments and all over Twitter. Thousands and thousands of people liking anti-Tom Tillis like tweets. And so he's probably going to get, I'm guessing, a well-funded primary challenge now. My understanding, it's not going to be Laura Trump, but the polling shows that she overwhelmingly wins. But what also happened is just in the last couple of days, people have been digging and they've said, well, look at how much pharmaceutical money that Tom Tillis has taken. It really looks like he's majorly funded by the pharmaceutical industry. And then you go back and look and you search on Twitter and you can see, well, here's Ed Martin tweeting 3, 4, 5 years ago about how great Donald Trump's idea of having a most favored nation pricing arrangement for pharmaceutical drugs would be. And so the conclusion I draw is that if Pharma backs Tom Tillis and Pharma hates Ed Martin, then Tom Tillis is going to hate Ed Martin. And now all of Twitter knows it. And so that's a new paradigm. And I'm really not sure what effect it's going to have on the Republican Party.
And the scales should have fallen off your eyes just now, folks, because that linkage, it's not an unknown linkage, but it's been put together by Tillis himself through his actions very, very nicely over the last 2 weeks. Tillis is supported by Big Pharma. Big Pharma didn't like Ed Martin. Ed Martin's going to do another job that Tillis is probably going to regret him going to. And now Judge James Pirro is going to come into the job Martin was going to. And they'll probably regret that one too, I would imagine. Well, let's take a question from the audience. We got a hand up over there. Go ahead, Shel.
I have Brandon, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me. My question is around the inaccuracies of these polls. Why do you believe, with the knowledge that the general public has about them and the bias that they tend to have, why do we feel that so many people still believe them and listen to them and follow them to make their own opinions?
Well, there's so much control and money and power at stake. We're talking about the keys of the levers of power in the largest superpower the world has ever seen, tens of trillions of dollars. The power to start wars, and it's just massive. And so corporations, as we've just talked about, have aligned with, in my opinion, a uniparty oligarchy and globalist interests to essentially milk Americans, the taxpayer donkey. Everything is a scam. Look at the pharma stuff. Apparently, the U.S. is 75% of the pharma industry revenue, but only 4.3% of the world population. And a lot of that's taxpayer funded. And so all these people around the world are benefiting from, the money that gets spent here, right? And it's just every single thing. The amount that the establishment wants us in a World War III. And so major corporations that are backed by these advertisers have a vested interest in making sure that an anti-establishment candidate gets shut down. That's the trend we're seeing, and they have so much control. They have Google search results, they have push notifications, they have social media censorship. They have so many tools. They have academia and the educational system. They've taken over literally every industry, and they're going to take over polling as well, and they have, in my opinion. And I think you're always going to need polling. If you didn't have polling, right, you're going to get the kind of elections that you see in South America, because there needs to be some expectation of what the results will be going into an election so that everybody can look back and say, well, no, we don't have confidence in this election. There needs to be a feedback loop like that, in my opinion, in a democratically based country. And so if that's the one thing, if there are people like me who put out numbers that people can trust because they're not associated with these corporate powers, that's a big problem. That's a really big problem. And as the colonel said, 538 came after us. And it wasn't about accuracy. It wasn't even about essentially being a Republican pollster, as they call it. It was because we wouldn't jump through the wickets and hoops that they were asking of us and nobody else. And it was things like, oh, give us proprietary information and explain to us why you don't have an ethical problem because you go on shows like this one or like Steve Bannon or like Fox News. So they were trying to hold us to a different standard, and we weren't able to meet it, and we decided we wouldn't want to. So they threw us out of the aggregate, and they thought that would destroy us. Turns out 538 no longer exists now because it doesn't work. It actually inserts more left-wing bias. So if the key instrument of the entire polling industry, according to them, 538, so many millions of dollars have been sunk into that turd. So many, tens of millions of dollars over the years, trying to push it, trying to use it as the sole source of truth. But it actually inserts more left-wing bias every single time than even the industry aggregate Real Clear Politics. It's pretty transparent what's going on, and it's all an info op.
Yeah, it is very transparent, and I've seen it firsthand. We'll talk about that when we come back from this break. And the opening clip, the next break, is going to talk about Donald Trump's economic approval numbers and handling the economy. This one really will blow you away even more than the immigration one. We'll be right back here on the Rob Maness Show with Mark Mitchell, the head pollster of Rasmussen Report.
But with Brandon, it's always cutting edge stuff happening in the world, and it's not just from the political angle, because you can get that on other platforms, but it's always from the biblical angle. So you're dealing with a guy that loves Jesus, you're dealing with a guy that's very intelligent, you're dealing with a guy that is cutting edge conservatism, and you're dealing with a guy that wants to be biblical all at the same time. And so for that reason alone, I hope many, many people will not just lift up his ministry in prayer, but will also financially get behind it, because he, from the angle I'm trying to describe, he really is the only game in town. And we desperately need it in these last days. Can I get an amen to that?
Let me just tell you, the economy and inflation is the whole kit and caboodle. As James Carville once said, it's the economy, stupid, but since I'm standing here with John Berman, it's the economy, smarty pants. Top issue facing America. Look at this. Number one, inflation in the economy at 43%. There ain't anything close to this, my friends. Political division, which comes in at number two, is 14%. That's a nearly 30-point gap. It's the only one that's over 15%. Donald Trump's presidency will ride or die on his ability to handle the inflation problem in this country and the economy.
So ride or die. How do Americans think he's doing on it?
Yeah. If you saw the cover page, I said, will the economy be Trump's Waterloo, to quote ABBA? Trump's net approval rating on the economy. Look at this. January of 2025, it was at plus 6 points. Look at where it's fallen to at this point, minus 14 points. That's not just the lowest of this term for Donald Trump. It's the lowest ever for Donald Trump when it comes to his net approval rating. It has fallen faster than his overall approval rating. At this point back in his first term, he was on the plus side of the ledger in double digits, plus 12 points. It has just fallen completely down. It has fallen through the floor, minus 14 points. This is a massive, huge, to use Donald Trump terminology, problem for his presidency.
All right, so they don't think he's doing well on it. Do voters at least think he's trying?
Yeah, this is, I think, the other big problem. They think Donald Trump's priorities are in other places. I mean, look at this. Think Trump is prioritizing these a lot. We talk about the economy. We talk 36% on the economy. We talk about inflation. It's below 30% who say that they think he is prioritizing inflation on a list of 8 that CBS News gave to voters, to Americans. Guess where the economy and inflation rank? 6th and 7th on an issue list of 8. They simply put, do not believe his mind is in the right place. He is not prioritizing the problem that they think is greatest right now to the American people. And that is why I said at the beginning, I could say that this might end up being Donald Trump's Waterloo, because he is failing on the issue that's most important to Americans.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're talking about the lying pollsters and their compatriots, too. And my guest today is the head pollster for Rasmussen Reports, Mark Mitchell. Mark, I have to give Harry Hinton credit, though. You know, he accurately reports what he sees in the polls for the most part, even if it's bad for the CNN narrative and audience. I've seen him do that before, so I don't want to disparage him too much. But wow, that set of numbers from that Ipsos poll is just so far out there. I mean, yesterday, wasn't it reported that inflation was like 0.01%, the lowest in many, many, many years, the rate of inflation?
Yeah, that was a tough cold open. You got to take Harry Hinton one little segment at a time because there's so much baked in there. First, I will say, this guy, I think, is maybe a schizophrenic. Depends on what week there will be positive or negative news. I think his producers are trying to like have him rotate just to keep people confused. But I can tell you there was a lot of deception and manipulation even in that segment that you might not have, like people might not have noticed. Is that first off, did you notice how they combined economy and inflation? And then you notice how the number two issue was division and the number wasn't that high and the issue border wasn't anywhere. Well, that's a tell. And then you notice, well, the last segment, the one, they're so horrible. Well, he's not prioritizing the economy. What kind of question is that? He's not prioritizing. Well, we don't know how many issues you have. And so 30%, maybe like, you know what I mean? Like maybe that's high compared to all the other ones. And also we're dealing with, he's using, you always have to check the source. He's using Ipsos for those economic numbers. You know that Ipsos has a Donald Trump sandbag of like 15, 20 points. And so all of that, and there's more. There's so much more in that segment. He's using emotion in order to convey a message about how bad this is for Trump without it being bad for Trump. Because listen, the economy is always the number one issue. It's always, every time you ask. But it's a question about, well, like, what's the context? And the context is only 22% of U.S. likely voters think today's children will be better off than their parents. That's horrifying. That has nothing to do with the stock market, which is why I'm sure the segment was from back when the stock market had a little bit of hiccup and all the corporate overlords got super upset. But we asked the question, like, how likely is it that Trump's tariff policies will cause a recession? And a majority of people said yes, it was like in the 60s. But then we also asked, well, like, is this what you voted for? And we get majorities as well. You know what I mean? So it's like, is the economy jobs or the stock market? Jobs wins over 60% to less than 20%. And so this is about jobs. This is also fundamentally about the government that perpetrated this on people with the border invasion and the lack of wage growth. And leave it to the corporate media to misframe. Now, is Trump's best issue the economy? Like, it's not his best issue. I think the last time we polled it, he got a 44% combined excellent or good. That's better than the voters rated Joe Biden on any issue ever.
Right. The question I had is about this prioritization. I mean, when I look at the policy stuff, and I'm on the list, I get all the EOs every day, so I'm seeing the flow of execution, so to speak, of the president and his team. And it seems to me as a voter that everything he's doing has some kind of priority and positive impact on the economy from a priorities perspective. Everything.
Yeah, well, again, I think that priorities question is just not a very useful one. It doesn't convey how's he prioritizing? I don't know how Donald Trump's prioritizing things. He's all over the place. And ultimately, it's one of those things where I think people will just answer along party lines. But I come back to right direction. Right direction. Generally speaking, is the U.S. headed in the right direction or has it gotten off on the wrong track? And we are setting records by the day. Just 2 days ago, we had net +3. We had only had one day before where it was above net zero. That means net +3. And then yesterday it was net +4, 49% right direction, 45% wrong track. Same results today.
Wow.
So now we've had 3 days where with a positive right direction, and they've all happened in Trump 2.0, and we have like 15 consecutive weeks now of right direction over 42%. That's a massive record. And so ultimately it comes down to you can baffle everybody with BS by cherry picking polls. The right direction doesn't lie. And even in the fake corporate media polls, those numbers are really high right now. And so it comes back to this was an in my opinion, federal government election. It was a referendum on the government because trust in the government was way worse than trust in Kamala Harris. Yep. And Trump's won. And now the fact that everybody's histrionic that's associated with the government, you're not going to make people cry. Like you wanted to put them into internment camps. You censored them.
Exactly.
You tried to throw half of America's political candidate in jail. So prioritizing the economy and inflation, he shouldn't be prioritizing inflation. It's not a problem anymore. Like it's stupid.
That's true. That's true. Well, let's take a question from the audience. Very energetic audience today. Go ahead, Shell.
We have Colonel Gannon Burton, sir.
Hey, Mark, you give me a lot of faith restored in the Naval Academy. I'm glad to hear that you're a graduate from there because I had lost a lot. So thank you. And thank you for your service. So my question is, and I'd heard you speak before on this, is pollsters in an environment where there's industrial scale voter fraud like the 2020 election. And there's no doubt in my mind it happened. And are they trying to predict what fraud they can get away with? And how do you keep your sanity as you do the real polling and then see that industrial scale voter fraud go down? Not to put words in your mouth.
Well, first off, thank you. I was class of 01, and so we were the last class that had a real plebe summer. Like the fraud is a problem, and so much so that we've pulled on it many times to the detriment of our business. They tried to censor us. We were on the GEC's list of top misinformation spreaders on Twitter just because we were asking Americans questions about this. I will say we did, in my opinion, we did a better job than people give us credit for in 2020 because on average, we were putting out about Biden +6 in the fall, and our final call was +1, but that's just where the musical chairs stopped. And so they'll cherry pick your final call to slander us. And so in reality, our national polling was about 2 points to left from where Joe Biden actually did, which means we underestimated Donald Trump's support nationally. But here's part of that truth. The polling did show that Joe Biden was going to beat Donald Trump nationally, and that's because there was a whole lot of people who were political normies being involved in that election. And in my opinion, there was also a lot of, and we have to be specific here, I do think there was fraud, but I think the bigger problem was mass scale asymmetries in electioneering. Meaning, well, I mean, I guess it's all fraud, but there were mail-in ballots flying around everywhere. We had 20% of all mail-in ballot voters saying they received at least one superfluous mail-in ballot at their household. Like, that's a bad number. And then it really came down to the swing states, though, as we all saw, where Donald Trump massively outperformed the polling, even our polling. We were too left in most of the states, and yet he won by... I can't think of clean analogy to explain how close it was that Joe Biden won that election by. So that was very frustrating. And so we spent a 4-year crusade talking about election integrity because we think that there needs more focus on it because it's a major voter issue. We're trying not to fight the liars in the polling industry. We're trying to get voters what they want. But then incidentally, we did miss really bad in 2018. And what history will tell you is that 2018 was a massive increase in turnout, like multiple, like sigma increase in the number of turnout in an off cycle. And it was also the one where, for the first time, Act Blue raised more than $1 billion. So I think there is a connection to our polling performance and election integrity because I don't think there's any way we could have polled the states accurately in 2020. And I'm surprised, happy, and lucky that we did as well as we did this time out. It needs to change. We're pushing for it. I would love to see Congress be more aggressive about it. And I'm hopeful that we're actually going to see change now because I can't do my job if there is massive wide-scale election fraud, and I do believe there is.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've been listening to what you guys have been talking about, the data you've been presenting. for a long time over this, and that's how I came to have a better understanding and convinced that exactly was voter fraud. And your point about the difference in electioneering, I think is important for people to know. And you could Pennsylvania is a case study from 2020. The Republicans left over 140,000 mail-in ballots on the table, and in 2024 we had a concerted effort that I'm proud to say I was a small part of to get doors knocked on and pull in those mail-in ballots, so that Trump's share of the mail-in ballots went from 20% to over 33%, and that's one of the things I think that strongly put him into the victory column for Pennsylvania and the presidency. Really, we got to take our last break. Mark, go ahead, 30 seconds.
No, I'm just like, that's the trend I've heard. There are a lot of major distributed volunteer organizations that have all come together to help Donald Trump win. The big question is, will they turn out when Donald Trump's not on the ballot? That's the big question.
That's a big question that I have for you in the next segment, because the right track, wrong track, you're exactly right. I've been watching it closely. That's why I follow Rasmussen, because they're the only ones that really do this consistently. But there's a problem. The problem is in the GOP, for one. I want to talk to Mark about that, some things we've seen in the last 24 hours. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday. The pollsters are lying to you.
Everything else is a great spirit in the United States right now. A brand new poll from Rasmussen just showed that the number of Americans who believe the nation is on the right track, they have a right track, wrong track, is now the highest in over 20 years. And it hasn't been anything like this because for many years it was the wrong track. And I can tell you for the last 4 years it was definitely the wrong track, but it's the highest it's been in many, many years. We renamed the Gulf of Mexico into the Gulf of America. That was very popular, other than perhaps with Mexico. And most importantly for the people in this room, the days of economic misery under the last administration are rapidly giving way to the greatest economy in the history of the world. We are rocking. The United States is the hottest country, with the exception of your country, I have to say, right? I'm not going to take that on. No, Mohammed, I'm not going to take that on. Wouldn't that be a terrible thing if I made that full statement? But I will not do it. You're hotter. At least as long as I'm up here, you're hotter. But groceries, gasoline, energy, and all other prices are down with no inflation. We have no inflation. In a few short weeks, we've created 464,000 brand new jobs. Think of that. It's almost 500,000 jobs created just in a matter of weeks.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and I figured that we had to give the opportunity to hear from the man himself in the last 24 hours. That was President Trump, giving a shout out to Rasmussen Reports. And Mark Mitchell, the head pollster for Rasmussen, is my guest today. And I had to use that clip, Mark, just to give the boss a chance to say those things, because those aren't government jobs he's creating. He's cutting government jobs. Those are real jobs that actually create wealth, that produce things, and those kind of things that he's talking about. There is a dramatic difference that the numbers don't tell you in that. But what I wanted to ask you on the right track, wrong track thing, there's two issues that I have on my mind, and we've got a question from the audience we'll take in a second here. But the first one is, the Republicans in the House tweeted out yesterday that they wanted to get me and you off the sidelines. And I don't know. I know that you're tracking GOP popularity, and you probably do it by House each house of Congress. What is their real approval rating? Because they're the ones that are sitting on the sidelines in the view of most of the Republicans that I know.
Well, what a tweet. I mean, listen, I make some good tweets, but when I have one that gets like 15,000 likes or something like that, you know that I nailed the Twitter zeitgeist, and the Twitter is really not happy after, quite frankly, Republicans got off the sideline, and independents and Democrats got off the sideline to elect Donald Trump. And the Republicans just don't seem like they're governing with the same DEFCON 1 attitude that Donald Trump is. Like, that's the problem. And I understand there's limitations, but they tried to like jail the unvaccinated. They jail the political opponent. They tried to censor people. They made a mockery of elections. And it's like, we're not going to break a sweat down in DC. And that's the problem. And not only that, it's just the tone deaf way in which they communicated it. But everybody always hates Congress. Only 11% rate them excellent right now. But the important number is what Republicans rate Congress right now. It's only 16% excellent, 33% good. That's 16% excellent. You would want to see higher. And only 22% poor. These are not resoundingly good marks. But this is the problem. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? Republicans in Congress are not delivering on the mandate given to them by the American people. And 61% agree with that statement, but it's 60% of Republicans too. Only 13% of Republicans strongly disagree. So again, Mike Johnson, I mean, I think the real problem here is one in communication and level of effort, and not necessarily, like, I understand that you all have to get it packed into the CR, and I understand there's so many closed doors negotiations that have to happen to get this done. But Nancy Pelosi would have been breaking things right now, and I'm not seeing it happen. And I think, listen, again, voters are happy, right direction is high. But the point is that the future electoral success for a pro-reform, anti-big spending government is not baked in right now. And so this is very much, the time that they're being tested.
Yeah, it seems to me the expectation that I have is a more than likely turn back to business as usual with the controlled opposition Republican Party. Well, let's take a question from the audience before we get to my next question. Go ahead, Shel.
All right, I have a question for Mark. What do you think about the poly market? I've been watching them, and a lot of people use them as a poll themselves. What is your opinion of them, and are they as accurate as something that you would do?
Yeah, also shout out to Kalshi, and I use poly markets more just because I like the visual, the way everything was presented. I thought it was a clean site. So what I would say is that I don't put out election predictions. I'm not Alan Lichtman, the Keys guy, who just goes and does a little bit of voodoo and says, oh, Trump's going to lose. I put out a ton of data, crosstabs, that say this is what was in this poll and this is why it came out this way, and you can look at the numbers yourselves and make conclusions. I do think that that is the way to look at the betting markets as well. I think they are very valuable data, but you have to understand how to use them. In fact, I would not look at any news headlines and look at honest pollsters, and the betting markets are probably, and also maybe early election returns and party registration numbers. Like, all of that data has to be combined in order to synthesize your own election prediction. The betting markets can be manipulated. People can go, some of the markets are very thinly traded. It's very possible to sign up and make that market whatever you want if you're willing to lose money and fix the market. But the major ones that matter, in my opinion, come election time, are too liquid for anybody to manipulate. And so if you looked at poly markets, as of really about October 15th, October 20th, poly markets showed that Donald Trump was winning at least 6 of the battleground states, and he won 7. And so, in my opinion, poly markets did, and that's about what I said, and leading up to that. And I think I beat poly markets, but it was nice to see when poly markets agreed with me. But I think they did great, considering that every mainstream media outlet, every single one, put out an electoral map that showed Kamala Harris winning. So in my opinion, there's some very useful data. You just have to know how to use it.
Yeah, I started watching them in the 2022 time frame is when it really got my attention. And my fear was exactly what you talked about, that somebody might be able to manipulate it. So I'm glad you answered that question for me, Mark. The big question, though, you brought up in the last segment, and that is, can Republicans that are reform-minded Republicans on the MAGA agenda, America First policies that Donald Trump was reelected on, and that this Congress was elected on, too, the majority in Congress was elected on, can we win without Donald Trump on the ballot? Because he's not going to be on the ballot. Finally revealed that it was a troll, that he might run again in 2028. And we've got a problem. And I don't know that, in the last 7 days, you've seen Democrat politicians and Congress people actually be involved in altercations, assaulting ICE officers up in Newark, New Jersey. The mayor of Newark, New Jersey, has been arrested by ICE and the Department of Justice in that kerfuffle. And Hakeem Jeffries just last night has made a threat, an open threat about illegal immigration and the policies and those kind of things, implying that there's going to be violence and everything. Is that going to hurt them and help the Republicans going into 26, do you think? Or is this Republican problem going to just continue to languish and languish and languish? I know you don't project elections, but what's your projection based on what you watch with people and voters, especially on the Republican side, about can we fix this issue in the GOP?
Oh, that's such a big question. And I would say, first off, that we're going to find out, in my opinion, this year what the next couple of years hold, because I think people put a lot, maybe too much hope in Donald Trump that he's able to fix all of these things. And I think he'll be able to fix a lot. But they're fighting him with every fiber of their being. And I think it'll come to a head. I think everybody's kind of chilled and relaxed right now. But once we get into the fall, or by then, we're going to see how committed the Democrats are. But here's what I'll say. The Democrats are not doing the things they need to do, in my opinion, to win, which is to go through basically an introspective cycle of self-healing. And what has happened is their establishment leaders are running to hide, and their louder, more obnoxious voices are filling the vacuum. People like Bernie Sanders and AOC and Jasmine Crockett and Hakeem Jeffries, and they're all virtue signaling about this. And it's almost like they're pushing for a confrontation on that very specific issue you mentioned. But I think that there are a million other ways that we could see major conflict, like Alina Habba going after Phil Murphy. And are they going to let a governor, a sitting governor, get rolled up? I don't know. Like, we might see how that pans out. And then there's also like black swans that I just don't know how they're going to play out, that factor into the 26 election. Like, are they going to shut down and indict people at Act Blue? That's a really big question. Is the Election Integrity Task Force going to work and be successful? Are they going to get the SAVE Act passed? Like, all of those, it's impossible to know. But then also, I can tell you that I'm not sure that J.D. Vance is the successor, but if he is, he doesn't poll nearly as well as Donald Trump. We polled him against Stephen A. Smith as just a complete outsider, and he only won 38-34. A ton of caveats about how early it is. And then we just did a recent one this week where we did J.D. Vance versus AOC. He only beats her by 3 or 4. And Bernie Sanders actually beat J.D. Vance. Again, a ton of caveats. But the things that I think we need to see is that Donald Trump needs to be looking towards the future with some kind of succession plan. And I know that's risky. And that Republicans need to be doing something to fix the fact that the establishment still runs the show. I know it's great that they have their own guy in the RNC, but the things I'm hearing from the ground is that the establishment still gets its way everywhere across the country, and that all of the money from the top down is getting siphoned back into the big Republican consulting machine, and it isn't going to support MAGA candidates.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. We've got to take that on, and the president's done a much better job this term and this time around at getting some control over the national RNC apparatus and those kind of things, but it's not nearly enough. It's obvious for that. Well, we got a couple minutes left. Let's take one more question from the audience before we get to the end of the show. Go ahead, Joe.
We have Cookie, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you both for your service. I was wondering how much has the the social media changed either better or made it worse for doing the polling?
I don't think it's really affected the polling, but I think it's having a huge effect on public opinion right now. It really feels like a different world just in the last 12 months because of Twitter. It feels like people are focused on an open dialogue and an exchange of information. You really don't hear things about like the right and misinformation. And that was a really big problem like 7, 8 years ago. And I remember how hard it was on the right to know if you're hearing fake news or not. And there were, a lot of conspiracies and tinfoil hat stuff that got spread around. And now it's like, no, Twitter, the public town square, has become a place where open, objective dialogue largely has been exchanged. And all of the people on the left have gone off into echo chambers like Blue Sky and Reddit. And I think that's dangerous for the country, but I also don't think they're able to win in the marketplace of ideas. That's a problem. And I said it in the fall. I said that if they don't reform, that the cult is going to get cultier, but also smaller. And it all just becomes like, how far do they want to accelerate and push this thing, and who is really pulling the strings behind the scenes. I can tell you in the polling, it feels that there's palpably a difference in Democrats, and I'm not sure if it's a real trend or something to do with their mental state right now. But I have a Donald Trump approval rating like 30% among Democrats. It's never been that high. And so I don't know if there are a ton of lefties out in the romper room somewhere, or they're coordinating to not take our polls. And I guess we'll see. But I think a lot of people came in and said, oh, man, I've never seen anything like this. And also, we know that Donald Trump got a lot more Democrat support than other people. So it's all going to play out over the next year or two. And I guess we'll see. But man, what a gift to humanity Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter was.
It certainly was, man. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for spending this hour with us. We appreciate it. And think about this, though. I want to pitch it to you because I thought about this idea as we were talking today. Is if we only had a Saturday Night Live crew like Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, this would make a great skit regularly on Saturday Night Live. The lying pollsters versus the honest pollsters. Think about who you'd want to play you in that. Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen Reports. Go follow him. We'll see you tomorrow on Truth Thursday. Autry Pruitt, chairman of the of a PAC and author and a Trump surrogate and a great guy. We're going to talk about news of the day and the challenges that we're facing out there.